Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Extra Shift. I'm Chris here, as always, with Brendan. How are we going?
Good. Yeah, nice to be here. Good timing. I think we, as much as the second round has started, we also have some interesting, draft lottery news. We've got a bunch of other kind of stuff to cover, and honestly, the hockey in the end of the first round, I think, was like the best we've seen of the playoffs so far. Those last couple of games, but we'll get into that shortly.
The first couple of games are not great, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely ended. The first round definitely ended much more excitingly than it started, but that is the way that it goes. But yeah, episode 220. Welcome everyone.
So 220. Obviously, we go down our list of who are our noted number 20s, and there's we look at who are the best of the best. We only ever look at the best of the best. Now, I could talk about Johnny Busick when he was playing for the Red Wings. I could do that if I wanted to. Dino Cicerelli for Minnesota. I could do that if I really wanted to. But I that's not me. I mean, noted media personality Frank Corrado.
Yeah,
great media personality Frank Corrado. He's actually really good in the media. It's terrifying how good he is.
Honestly, yeah. Like as much as we talked about, some players being like, "Oh, they'll be great in the media" or whatever. Like, we're starting to regret some of those. Yeah, those decisions.
Meanwhile, noted Toronto Maple Leaf Joel Edmondson, noted Leaf, of course. That's what he's known for. And if we're talking about, I like talking about former front office people and former front office people. I mean, Ray Ferrara is the obvious answer there. So is Tom Fitzgerald, but I'm instead going to go with Dean. We're going to go with former coach of Minnesota, Dean Evason from the Calgary Flames in '96. That's my pick.
Fair. I mean, I feel like, I don't know why, like, of all of the number 20s, the one that I think of is like perpetual third round pick to the Capitals at the deadline, Lars Eller. I don't know what it is.
Always traded for the deadline for a third.
And usually to the Washington Capitals.
Yeah, I'd like to actually go through and look at his history and work out exactly how many times he was traded to Washington.
It's at least twice. The years where it wasn't, it was because he was already on the Capitals.
Already on them, and they can't trade to themselves. No, that is kind of his career when you think about it, isn't it? You're like, what's Lars Eller notable for? Always being traded to Washington.
Always being traded to the Washington Capitals. That's it.
So yeah, in terms of that, also the other one I have to mention is noted Shark Ed Belfour.
Oh yeah,
only noted as a Shark and nothing else.
That's it. That's all he's done.
Nothing else. Nobody recognizes Ed Belfour except for his 1 year with the San Jose Sharks in '97. Anyway, let's get into it. Before we get into it, I do trivia.
I just found Dick Duff, and I have to mention
you found Dick Duff?
There is Hall of Famer. One time played 1 year with the Buffalo Sabres, Dick Duff. Sorry. It's
you know what they say? You know what they say? Dick Duff's enough.
That's right.
Dick Duff is enough.
One Dick Duff's enough.
Dick Duff is enough. We do trivia, obviously. Now, I haven't found a one of 220 this time because it was just really painful to find. So I decided to go with a random Gordie Howe bit of trivia for Brendan.
Okay.
So, if Bobby Orr played as long as Gordie Howe, what season would have been his last?
Oh God, that's tough. All right, so let's try and work this back.
Good luck.
He played a long time. I mean, like he was like 50 or something, right, when he retired?
Yeah, he played. He played all the way through, including playing in the 80s.
Yeah,
he played a game in every decade. He was playing non-league hockey, like well into the early 2000s. He played games of non-league.
Oh God. So, oh gosh, what's my timeline on this?
Give us a season.
Yeah, it's got to be. It's going to be like mid. Is it like 95 or something? I don't know. I'm just going to pull a number out of there.
The 1999-2000 season.
All right. Wow. Yeah, even longer than I thought.
It gets better. If you did it with Gretzky, it would have been 2012-2013.
Wow.
And if you do it with Sidney Crosby, it would be 2038-2039.
Oh, wow. Potentially Crosby could have played, if Gretzky had played that long, he could have played with like with Gretzky and Lemieux at the same time.
And the last couple of bits here, I just want to give the last couple of bits because these are fascinating. The reason I went with these is these are fascinating. So remember, Gordie Howe was playing in the league before Bobby Orr was even born.
Yeah.
And playing after he retired.
Yeah.
When
the
Gretzky
true Yager of his era.
When Gretzky was born, Howe was already the NHL points leader. Howe's last season was Gretzky's first, as we do know.
Yeah.
And also, Orr was in the Hall of Fame when Howe retired.
Wow.
He's at the career of, and again, we've talked about Gordie a million times.
Insane.
Gordie Howe's career remains one of the greatest careers in sports. How many men do you know who come out of retirement when they're should be well and truly past it because they want to play with their sons?
Yeah.
And it's still close to the best player on the team.
Yeah.
He was really good as an arrow. Like he was really good as a
defense. I mean, I think the closest we've probably seen in recent years is Yager. And
Yager.
Even in the last. Oh no, I know. Yeah, but like even in the last few years, I was like, there were certainly times like when he, I think last year came back to kind of have his jersey retired and stuff in Pittsburgh and everything. I'm like, just put him on the ice. It couldn't be any worse than.
Yager's, as we all know, Yager is still out there stealing your junior captain girlfriends.
And he did warm up with the Penguins, and like a bunch of them went like he could play. He could. He could definitely play.
I would have no doubt that Kyle Dubas every year just puts in a call.
Yeah. See if you can sign him to a contract.
We got him, maybe. Who knows? So let's get into the news. The big news is that second comes right after first. We're number two. The San Jose Sharks have won second in the draft lottery. That's the big news. It's not. No, let's talk about the island of relevancy.
Yeah. So I wasn't watching the broadcast. I just saw like the comments. I was busy at the time, and I saw people starting to comment and following like a bunch of like Pittsburgh people. I saw like it got down to like the last ball draw where it was like equal chance of like the Islanders and Pittsburgh and like a bunch of teams like way down the list.
Detroit ended up being one number off.
Yeah, and technically, yeah, like they all had like an 11% chance or whatever by the end of it, starting from like a 5 or 3% chance or whatever, and I'm just like, shit, is this going to be like, no one will ever believe that this wasn't rigged if the Penguins win it, and of course it was, the Islanders probably really need it more than anyone, but
the Islanders being able to do the jump from 10 to 1, like that was literally the furthest back you could be to make that jump.
Yeah,
was hilarious to me. But look, obviously as a Sharks fan, I wanted number one again. But however, thank you to Utah, because by Utah obviously winning the second one, they can't jump up to second. So the San Jose Sharks pick second. Default, the two sweetest words in the English language, as the Sharks managed to clinch second with a tough showing. Look, I'm quite hopeful personally that the Islanders lose their ever-loving minds and decide they need a center.
I mean, it's not impossible. We've seen weird things happen in draft. It's like, look, we're not talking about a Sidney Crosby draft or a Connor McDavid draft necessarily. There's been some chances where it could.
Higgins and Mesa, like Michael Mesa would be, if they were going outside of defense, Michael Mesa would be the center. Except James Higgins will be somewhere in that top 10, and he is from the island. And do they want to go with the local? But if I was drafting first, and I was hoping we were, I think the number one pick is Schaefer. Yeah, it should be Matthew Schaefer.
You're not drafting for need at number one. You're drafting for the best available player. Like realistically,
I am really hopeful that the Islanders decide they really could do with the center. Because if the Islanders decide that they could do with the center, we get Schaefer at 2 and happy days. I'd be thrilled. Mike Greer has apparently said he's not against the idea of trading back from 2, which is interesting. But I would be interested to see what that offer would have to look like. I'm sure there are teams out there that would be desperate to draft. If Michael Mesa is there at 2, there will be teams that will be desperate to get a center like that inside their organization. For us, it's really interesting because we don't need the center. Like we've got We've got obviously down the middle. We're pretty well stacked at the moment in terms of Celebrini and Will Smith, who's been playing on the wing but is a centre. Eklund's obviously that you've got players. We've got
yeah.
centre. Like,
it's not an organizational need. Yeah.
If he comes into the organization, he's playing wing. He's not.
Yeah, I mean, look, and if there's a team in that bracket that needs defense, it's the Sharks.
But well, that's why I wanted him. But let's give the kudos to the Islanders. This is massive for the Islanders. They need new blood. Like after Lou went out there and signed everybody who was over the age of 30. This is an organization that needs.
Yeah, there hasn't been a huge, kind of influx of skill, young skill, especially, in terms of like, really high end prospects in some time. They've had a couple of guys kind of hit, but like for the most part,
it wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really. Yeah. I'm curious to see, what will happen there. I don't know that's immediately going to turn them around from being middling, but it's a good step in the right direction.
No, look, this is not the John Tavares first overall pick. This is definitely not that. But there are a couple. Everyone's talking about the fact this is not a generational changing draft, but there are a lot of solid players in the top 5 that everyone's like, there's good solid players there. You will get players who are first round picks who are going to play like their first round picks. They're just not going to be, a Celebrini, for example. They're not that. You're not going to get that level of player out of this year's draft. So, look, it's one where I'm quite comfortable with the Sharks being second. We're not talking about third because no one wants to talk about the Blackhawks. I don't know. Like, how many more players can the Blackhawks draft and still be terrible?
It's a challenge. It's I mean, look, there's a few teams like that. I mean, I feel like the Ducks are kind of in the same boat, and
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously, I am expecting the Sharks need to do something to move further up next year, and I expect they will. I think they will make that leap, but not a massive leap. But I think they'll make the strides towards being relevant again. But the Islanders winning the draft lottery is a massive thing for that job in particular, because as we know, the general manager position in the Island is open.
Yeah. I mean, how incredible that the moment that Lou leaves, that they win the first overall pick.
I wonder, also, I think there are a couple of things that were proven by the draft lottery, the live draft lottery, and I think the first thing that was proven was that they don't do the lottery live, not because there are conspiracies around the draft lottery, but because it's incredibly boring.
It's not fun to watch.
Every single ball is spoken about before. It's so dull. Yeah. Like, there's tension at the end of it, but the whole process takes forever.
Yeah.
And I'm just...
it's all the excitement of watching bingo without the quippy number rhymes.
Mike Greer, who should have had a vested interest in paying a lot of attention, looked like he would rather be napping.
Yeah.
Like, I was sure Mike wanted
the guys at the back are just like...
Everyone outside of the top 10 are just like, oh, for God's sake. No, I don't care. I just don't. Like, I was just, the idea of, you're like 14, you're sitting there, what am I doing with my life? I'm sitting here watching ping pong balls for a thing I can't win. Do I have to come? I would like it. I wonder if everybody, like, outside of 10 has the ability to say to the league, why? I can't.
Why do I have to be here for this?
Pick it in absence, because if I win that, you're not going to want to see my reaction if I win that lottery.
Yeah.
If I win that lottery and I'm 14, like, you're not going to want to be there because I'm going to rip everything apart. Like, I would go nuts. Speaking of going nuts, let's shift from the island and the island of relevancy to the New York Rangers, who we said a couple of things on the last podcast. The first thing we said was that Chris Drury in no way, shape or form deserved a new contract and the Rangers needed to move on from him. So the day after, they signed into an extension.
Almost immediately,
It was the day after, literally. Secondly, we said there's not a chance in hell that Mike Sullivan would leave the Penguins and go to the Rangers. Are you crazy? Mike Sullivan is, of course, now the new head coach of the New York Rangers.
Of course, yeah. I mean, look, we more or less said like straight away, like, why now? Like, there'd been speculation for a couple of years of like, oh, maybe he'll take this job, potentially like, and I think in the past, he'd been talked about as like an option for like Boston too, because of where he's from and all of that kind of thing. And the year that like all of those teams totally fall off the map, Boston, Rangers and Penguins totally off the map. I think it's interesting. Clearly something changed when the New York job became available. Like, clearly that is something that he wanted, but it just wasn't available up until that point. And the moment that it became available, within 24 hours, there was essentially like, the Penguins have mutually agreed to part ways with Mike Sullivan. Like, I imagine that probably what went down is he went to them and went like, hey, look, I've been here for a while, I've been putting in the hard yards or whatever. We're clearly rebuilding. I want a chance to, go to New York and do whatever there. I don't know how he views that team, but clearly that's a more attractive situation for him rather than riding out the last couple of years of the Penguins core. And look, I don't blame him. Like, I didn't realize this, like, Sullivan is the longest tenured coach in Penguins history. Thinking back, he's been there a while. Obviously, winning back-to-back won him a lot of rope. And it seemed like for years it had been like, well, look, it seems like the magic's worn off and it's time for a change. It's time for him to go. And they'd hung on to him regardless. Like, it's not like there was a better coach available out there. Like, I do think that Mike Sullivan is a great coach, but there is a certain point in time where people just aren't really listening to it. The system doesn't work anymore. Whatever it is, there's that combination, has ended. Like, coaches in the NHL have the shortest shelf life of any of those major, professional sports for a reason. After all of these, I've been probably saying for about 3 years, like, maybe it's time to move on from Mike Sullivan, from being like, reluctant to being like, all right, I think we've seen enough here. And it's honestly surprised me to see it be like now, when I felt like, wow, if they didn't do it 2 years ago, why would they do it now? And I think that the thing changed is like Mike went, yeah, okay, all right, I give up. I want to go to here.
See, my confusion around Sullivan going to the Rangers is it's partly that, like, why now for leaving the Penguins?
Yeah,
but the other part of this for me is why the Rangers now, when there's a rebuild that has to happen there. Like, he's moving into a great goaltending situation, no doubt about that. He's moving into the best goalie in the league. But
I think that they think that the Rangers are, a bounce back away from competing again. I don't know if that's true.
That's ridiculous. Like, that idea. I was listening to one of the various New York Rangers pods the other day. I was going through and listening to it. I wanted to hear what they had to say about the rehire. And first of all, they all agreed that it was absolutely stupid and there was not a planet on which they should rehire him. But the follow-up was they were talking about, well, obviously there was that rumor about the whole rebellion in the locker room over Drury and the way he'd managed that team. And something? These players need to take responsibility for that. And these players who rebelled against Drury, well, you're just saying that Drury was terrible and was horrible for morale and built the team incorrectly and didn't quite know what he was doing and moved. And they also commented on the fact that all the players he moved in seemed a little bit slower and a little bit worse than what he was moving out. And then turned around and said, but these players, Mika Zibanejad, if you're not happy with that, step up in the playoffs, step up in the third round. And I'm like, guys, you've got to make it to the playoffs first.
Yeah, you got to get it back there.
If you think that your problem is Mika Zibanejad, your problem might be Mika Zibanejad, but it's not because of him. It's because he's playing first-line center, which he is not and has never been a first-line center. So it's not his fault that the team is sucking because he's playing center on the first line. Why has your general manager not got a better center? What are you doing? Where's your development? Oh, that's right. You brought in this general manager who shipped all the development players out. Right. You brought in this general manager who undid all of the work that the Rangers had been doing to go out and get tough, grizzled guys who are going to play hockey the way the Rangers should play hockey. This is what he built, and you can't work out why it's going wrong. Right? This has got nothing to do with Zibanejad as a center in terms of Zibanejad's fault.
Yeah.
Why did you leave him?
It's the build of the team for sure. But like, it's funny because clearly, based on their actions, like I just can't come to any other conclusion than them considering like that they seriously believe or this year was was an accident, and we're just going to retool and be right back to being competitive next year.
33-year-old Artemi Panarin, who's coming off a really interesting set of media reports over his last season's activities. 32-year-old Mika Zibanejad, who no one in New York seems to want. JT Miller at 32. Chris Kreider at 34 and now being injured as all hell. Vincent Trocheck at 31. Sam Carrick at 33. Right, this is what you're playing on that top line with Lafreniere copying all of the media hits about what's going on with Lafreniere. Why can't he? Who's passing Lafreniere the puck?
So it's funny because like I feel like they're basically in the position that the Penguins were 2 years ago, where they were thinking like, oh, it'll be okay, we'll make a couple of moves and we'll be back to trying to compete for the for the mid-30s of these of this core's term. But those core players aren't as good as the core players that were on the Penguins.
No, they're not. And this is the problem. You've got all these players who are not particularly great. Like they're not particularly great. But the Rangers seem to overvalue them, right? And I don't know why the Rangers seem to overvalue them at the moment. It feels utterly bizarre, but we're in this weird situation that they seem to think that they've got a core that's just one step away from being better. And, what you're actually doing is wasting Adam Fox. What you're doing is you're wasting. How are you wasting Shesterkin's contract before it starts?
Yeah.
You are wasting Shesterkin's contract before it starts. Like it hasn't started yet, and he's being wasted. So I
know what the funny thing is? Like I think that they could be a wild card chance next year just because of how bad the entire rest of the Metro is.
I mean, yeah, they could end up getting into a wild card because of the Metro.
Yeah.
But
like we just saw, the Devils and the Canadians make it, with very piss poor seasons, and they could very much be in that position.
But what you'll get if the Rangers manage to make it into the playoffs off the back of that, what you'll get is a Montreal like reaction. Look, we're ready, we're here, we're playing, and no, like. No, you're not. You're just not ready yet. And I don't understand what they're doing. I think it's ridiculous. I don't think Mike Sullivan can make those players better.
Yeah.
Like how are you?
Yeah, I'm curious to see what difference he will. I think that he's a good coach. He'll bring a kind of a lunch pail kind of style to it that probably suits some of their less talented guys a little bit better. I don't know whether he'll be significantly better defensively. He's not usually the guy that's responsible for that kind of thing. I don't know. I'm curious to see how that impacts their play style, whether or not they kind of try to change up the way that they play. I'm not expecting a huge difference overall.
I mean, look, they might have looked at the fact that he worked really well with like an aging Penguins roster and go, well, look, he can do this to our aging roster, and that's why they've got him in there.
Yeah.
I think also the Rangers are preparing to ignore all of the noise around Artemi Panarin, and they're just going to ignore it. As I've said a million times, and I will continue to say it, I would have traded Artemi Panarin not because of the off-ice stuff. I would have traded Artemi Panarin because I think he's not good enough when you need him to be good, and he's good when it doesn't really matter. And I have maintained that point the whole way through. And I don't think that's what they need. I think they needed to put their money into center and use the talented wingers they had, rather than ship all the talented wingers out, have one of them left, and have Panarin on that wing with nobody to give him the puck. Like, I think that the money it's weighted incorrectly. Like,
I suspect that they think that JT Miller probably fixes that problem for them next year, and we'll see whether that's true.
Oh, that's going to be fascinating. Anyway, let's go on to the awards. So, the Calder. Now, the Calder will be interesting because I obviously have a favorite in this one, but I don't think he's going to win it. He should, but he won't. Macklin Celebrini, San Jose Sharks, Lane Hudson, Montreal Canadiens, Dustin Wolf, Calgary Flames. I think they're going to give it to Hudson. I suspect so. I would give it to Celebrini, but I'm biased. But I genuinely would give it to Celebrini. I think his performance has been outstanding in a team that is absolutely horrific.
Yeah, I think, yeah, for sure. Like, I think that I'd be happy with either of them. I think that some of the records that Hudson has set is probably will probably play into that
Playoffs will
being able
carry
to
the day
quite a
too.
lot.
Like
Yeah,
Hudson makes
especially
the playoffs.
that, on a playoff team, the fact that he has broken some some pretty significant records for a rookie and is really kind of one of the kind of major point getters on that roster of that probably didn't really deserve to be there.
And look, for me as well, I'm taking the positives out of the idea that Macklin won't win. Because if Macklin doesn't win, he joins the ranks of all of the other great players that didn't win the Calder. So I feel probably more comfortable with the idea that he won't win the Calder because then he's obviously going on for a brilliant career, and I'm fine with that. I'll take that instead.
Fair.
As everyone points out whenever they talk about the Calder, Connor McDavid didn't win the Calder.
Yeah.
No, he did not. All right, the Jack Adams.
Yeah.
So Scott Arnell for Winnipeg, Spencer Carberry for Washington, Martin St. Louis for Montreal. It's got to be Spencer Carberry, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, again, it's the list of teams that did better than we expected them to, and made the playoffs. That is essentially what the Jack Adams is. Usually, it's goalie based. I think probably the Capitals are the biggest of those examples of like, hey, we didn't expect you to be good enough to win the President's Trophy. So I can't imagine why he doesn't win.
The Habs made the playoffs because somebody had to make the tail end of the playoffs.
Yeah, in the East especially. Yeah.
Yeah. Winnipeg were great, obviously, but they were.
And Montreal had like a long stretch of being garbage during the year.
This is the thing. When everyone was talking about, the Habs are back, baby, again, and I'm just like, no, look at the East.
Yeah, Winnipeg basically had like that incredible stretch at the start of the year where they put up all of those points, and then an incredible essentially Vezina caliber year, which we'll talk about shortly for Connor Hellebuyck. Let alone the slightly diciness that he looks in the playoffs compared to the regular season. That doesn't really necessarily play into this.
No.
But yeah, I can't see how Carberry doesn't win it.
The Masterton this year is going to be really interesting. That's one of the first times you'd ever say that. Marc-Andre Fleury for Minnesota, Landeskog for Colorado, or Monahan for Columbus. How did they not give it to a player from Columbus?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's some serious, like, I feel like, Fleury is obviously retiring. He stuck around for a long time, but he's gonna get like a Hall of Fame nod. They probably don't. He probably doesn't need that. Landeskog, coming back after not playing for 2 years and being like a difference maker in the playoffs, is pretty incredible. And look, Monahan, all the stuff around Columbus and the impact that he's had there and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I seriously don't know what.
I feel like it's got to go to Monahan because they're gonna need. I think they have to give the Masterton to somebody from Columbus. So that's what I feel like.
Yeah, I reckon probably Monahan is the. I feel like if Landeskog had come back like maybe a little bit earlier in the season, he might have had like more of a chance.
How do you have an organization that loses obviously such a pivotal person, and you don't give it to someone from that organization?
Yeah.
I think it's got to be. And it gives them their feel good moment, and it gives them their moment again. It gives them a good moment again, so that's fine. Selke, Barkov, because Barkov.
Yeah, he's the new Bergeron for the Selke, really.
Anthony Cirelli and Sam Reinhart. We'll talk about Sam Reinhart in a minute. Barkov, because it's a award now. Like, it's been handed over.
It's the default. It's the default.
We'll come back to the Hart because I think the Hart's an interesting conversation. Ted Lindsay, Kucherov, McKinnon, and Kyle McCarr. Look, I would go McKinnon.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Like McKinnon, I think is probably the safe option there.
I think the Lindsay might be a sorry you couldn't get a Hart nomination.
I suspect so. Yeah,
because I would have had him in my Hart nominations, but we'll come back to that in a minute.
Yeah,
Vezina, Hellebuyck, Kemper, and Vasilevsky. It's Hellebuyck.
It's Hellebuyck and the walk, really.
That's why Winnipeg or where they are. It's kind of Hellebuyck. We did say at the start of the year that the Winnipeg Jets would go as far as Connor Hellebuyck let them.
Yeah.
So that was exactly what we said at the start when we did our preview, was the Jets are entirely whatever Hellebuck wants them to be. If he wants to be great, they'll be great. If he's terrible, they'll be terrible. The Heart, Draisaitl, Hellebuck, Kucherov. I think
we so rarely see a goalie win the Heart, though.
This is the thing. I think it's going to be Draisaitl.
Yeah.
But I think, and I'm not a big fan, obviously, of Winnipeg, and I think Hellebuck is spotty as all hell. But most valuable, it's that stupid phrasing argument that everyone has every year. Most valuable to their team. You can't tell me that if Connor Hellebuck doesn't do what Connor Hellebuck does, Winnipeg are where they are.
No, definitely.
I think that the correct answer should be Connor Hellebuck. It will be Leon Draisaitl.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's so hard for a goalie to win it, because realistically, a goalie should probably win it every year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely in this case he's earned it, and again, we don't praise him a lot because why would we? But all right, let's get into.
I like Connor Hellebuck, but
let's get into the playoffs, shall we? So let's start with the West.
Which was the more interesting side, really.
Winnipeg and St. Louis, that should never have been anywhere near as close as it was.
Yeah, that was incredible.
Connor Hellebuck, again, like we've talked about the greatness of Connor Hellebuck all the way through the season. Let's talk about Connor Hellebuck in the playoffs, shall we?
Yeah, spotty as shit during some of those early games. And the start of this game, like, honestly, like, it seemed like it was over. Like, St. Louis were up 2-0, and then they were up 3-1, I think, from memory. And coming into the last period, it's like, well, really all they've got to do is lock it down. Obviously, Winnipeg, ties it up with 3 seconds remaining. It goes to overtime. It goes to overtime again, and then they come back to win it in double overtime. Obviously a significant choke by St. Louis at a game and a series that they pretty much had under control, given how shitty Hellebuck had been at times. But wow, I was
staggered. I was watching bits and pieces of that game 7, and a 3-1. I thought it was done, and then I'm like, they're not going to choke this one away. And then I saw the first one, I went, oh no. And then the second, that one goes in with 3 seconds to go, and you're like, well, we know how this ends now.
Yeah.
You're not conceding that with 3 seconds to go and then winning. It's just going to be how long can you hang on before you lose.
Yeah.
Dallas came from 2-0 down. Mikko Rantanen coming
incredible,
back.
Like the like against his former team, of all things, like the perfect timing to score one, score another, tie it up, get the an assist on the go-ahead goal, and then bury the empty netter with like a minute to go to seal it.
That series was insane, and like, look, the Abs I thought the Abs at one point had them dead to rights, and then
especially with Robertson missing the entire series. I thought we talked about it on the last podcast coming into it. Like I made my picks for my bracket before the last game of the season where Jason Robertson got injured, and I thought like, oh shit, I picked Dallas. I don't feel good about that anymore. I don't think they're going to have it to beat Colorado, and they managed to pull it off. And they wouldn't have without that Mikko Rantanen trade. Like you can't know at the times when you make that trade. Rolling back time to when Colorado makes that Mikko Rantanen trade earlier in the year, they know they're not going to be able to re-sign him. They make that trade knowing like, well, this is for the best of our organization for us to get some assets now before he kind of walks in free agency. How can you possibly think this worst case possible scenario, we're going to play him in the playoffs and he's going to single-handedly defeat us? Like there's no way it could have gone worse than that.
I still think long term they got the trade right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like
they got the term right.
I cannot fault them for their decision.
They've got a player who will be better for longer.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot at all fault them for that. They made the right decision. They still did. It just did not work out.
They were also not to expect that somebody was then going to move him back into their division.
No, definitely
they could not have predicted that they were going to move him back into the division.
Yeah.
Go, oh crap. Look, I felt really bad, but the goaltending in Colorado has been the issue. Like they went out when you're going out to sign, obviously, the Sharks goalie as your solution to your goaltending problems, you've probably got massive problems. And again, I've loved his work as a goalie, but like
they just haven't had a good goalie solution in like the entire time that McKinnon has been there, even the year that they won. Like it's very Fleury-esque during his Penguins era kind of thing. It's like, well, they won, once despite Fleury
Yes.
during that time. Like
it's like as obviously better than anyone. Like as a Penguins fan, if you go back and talk about which goalies won the cup with the Penguins, go back and tell someone now who has not been following hockey that Matt Murray.
Yeah.
That Matt Murray was a superstar in the playoffs and won a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, stole a series, stole a series from the Caps,
I mean, the funniest part about that for me is if you go back and look at that Stanley Cup final, not to bring that Stanley Cup final up again, but go back and tell people that the two goalies who were absolutely on fire in that playoff were Martin Jones and Matt Murray.
Yeah.
Go on, tell them. They won't believe you. There's no way anyone believes you.
Every dog has his day.
And that was their day. Vegas defeats Minnesota in 6, which retires Fleury. And I was interested. It took Vegas longer than I thought it would.
Look, Minnesota hung around for sure in that series. There were some times when they looked good, but ultimately you just didn't really have the firepower to do it.
Vegas, we'll talk about Vegas a little bit more when we get to the next series, but they're weird at the moment. They're really weird.
Yeah.
And Edmonton fight back from going 2-0 down, winning 4 straight against LA to win the series in 6. I was the only person on the planet that when Edmonton went 2-0 down, but it's the Kings against Edmonton, and I want to get excited because we all know my views on Edmonton. But then I knew that everyone was going to get overhyped about Edmonton making the comeback.
Yeah.
Going, look at them, they're on fire. They're the greatest team in the NHL. Look at them, they're playing the bloody Kings, and that is why General Manager Rob Blake is now ex-general manager, because the Kings finally did what they should have done 12 months ago and sacked him.
Honestly, it was really the decision of could Edmonton choke it. That was really kind of what it was up to for me. When they went 2 down in the series, I kind of went like, I'm actually kind of feeling a bit better about this. But I was questionable about it. We talked about it in the last podcast. Like I picked it just because I felt like, oh, maybe Edmonton will screw it up at the end. And they very well could have. Like they managed to find a way to kind of turn it on and win 4 in a row, obviously, and put it down. But going 2 down, statistically, there aren't a lot of teams that come back from that. And I thought that at least once they went 2 down, I'm like, oh, this is going to go to game 7, and it'll be one of those ones of like, do they choke it or do they manage to pull it out? And I figured that if they went into a game 7 with LA, that they would choke it. But clearly they managed to not do that and win it in 6.
I think, I think what's coming up now of this series, and we'll talk about this series that's coming up in a minute. I think this series is going to be a battle of which goaltender screws up the least. That's what we're facing with Vegas versus Edmonton. It's going to be which one of them makes the least number of mistakes. And whoever makes the least number of mistakes wins, because I don't think it matters. I think that's the only thing that matters in this series. It's which goal is better. That's the answer. Let's go to the East. So I'm going to come back to Toronto because we're going to come back to Toronto. We'll start with Carolina, who just rolled over the top of New Jersey. Obviously,
we knew that New Jersey were very, handicapped coming into this series. They didn't have their best player. It was always going to be a tough ride for them.
If you are the New Jersey Devils and you don't have a player called Hughes in your lineup, you're probably done.
Yeah,
that's it. Simple. Washington pushed Montreal to one side, like all the hype around Montreal. This is their time. Look at them. They're going. Washington just kind of went, yeah, sure, whatever, cool, just push past. That series will be remembered purely for the bench brawl. The whole purpose of it, and everybody's favorite thug crying. This is the series where we had crying Tom Wilson.
Yeah.
Don't forget, everybody. Never forget crying Tom Wilson.
He's done it a couple of times, but
but this is the latest one, and it's the first time where you really saw everybody on the internet go, "Oh, come on!" Like usually you get some people defending him, going, "Oh no, he's clever." You see. This time it was like, "Nah,
come on, man, come on,
this is ridiculous." Florida beat Tampa in 5, which destroyed everything.
I was honestly expecting that to be a lot closer. Clearly Yeah, clearly we thought better of Tampa. It didn't really kind of come together for them in this series. The Battle of Florida, historically had been like a really good kind of, series. In the last couple of years, obviously, Florida's kind of really taken that step ahead.
And
I think we just underestimated Florida a little bit.
Yeah, I had no expectations on Florida in this one.
Yeah.
And then they showed up. Tampa kind of didn't. And
look, obviously, we maybe overlooked the reigning champs. We didn't expect that they had it in them. They found another gear and they
we saw their celebrations. They're still drunk.
Yeah.
Surely they're still drunk.
We'll see how long it lasts. I'm curious to see whether they can hold it out. But they look good.
Well, speaking of can they hold it out, the urge to choke in Toronto is so strong. It is so inbuilt. And the reason I wanted to get to Toronto now is because I want to back-to-back this into the second series, because they go 3-0 up and then proceed to drop the next 2 to Ottawa to finally fall over the line in 6.
Yeah, look, I never thought that they were going to sweep. The reality is, it's so hard, especially for a team with that level of kind of mental baggage. Like, it's so hard to put down a team in 4.
I had them winning the series, but
yeah, for sure. Like, I never thought that they were going to get reverse swept and lose in 7 or anything like that. Like that, I think that the chances of that were incredibly low. They were going to accidentally beat them at some point.
Let's get to game 1 of round 2, where Florida. Toronto goes 4-1 up and manages to boldly pull out a 5-4 win.
Yeah. To be fair to them, after their this is of course after their starting goalie takes an elbow to the head from Sam Bennett and is taken to hospital.
We need to talk about this. So Sam Bennett, no further action. Was not investigated by player safety, who decided that it was fine, the elbow to the head. The other thing I think that made it more confused was that, now obviously Styles went to the bench, then threw up on the bench twice and was taken by ambulance to hospital. What made this harder was there's also a lot of footage and evidence that he was already concussed, that he got hit by a puck early on in the face. And Chris Nowinski, who's obviously doing all the research into CTE, commented on the fact that 15 seconds after, there's that shake that you do, where it's the involuntary shake when you're trying to clear cobwebs out, and usually it's a sign of concussion. And about 15 seconds after he gets hit with the puck, he had that involuntary head shake going. And Nowinski's like, if you look at the footage, he's concussed. At that point in time, he has suffered a concussion. What happens after that? Happens. Doesn't help it. I think the Bennett should have been looked at. I think that they should have looked at that, because it was quite clearly an elbow to the head. But I think it might have been was there a concussion beforehand conversation that might have helped Sam Bennett a little bit there.
I mean, it's fucked. Like the NHL's concept of whether or not someone should be penalized for something is whether or not someone is seriously injured by it, regardless of intent. It's like the line is so blurry. It's like attempted murder, fine. Murder, all right, that's where we draw the line. But like it's silly, but that is the standard that they've decided on long ago, and that is kind of what they play at.
It very much feels like the whole, attempted murder. Do you get a Nobel Peace Prize for attempted chemistry? That's very much that sort of vibes to it. But look, they obviously, there were circumstances there. I am interested to see what the effect of this is. We also have heard in the media that there are Toronto fans that got access to his hotel room number and were giving out his hotel room number and the phone number for that hotel and telling people to go and put a hit on him, and like, welcome to playoffs with Toronto being involved, and the nuts that we're going to see about this series. I'm interested to see if Toronto come out and keep their heads, or if Toronto come out and decide they're going to go drop people. And I'm also interested to see, I hope for the sake of hockey that Berube doesn't do something stupid like Ryan Reeves. But there is a chance that we get Ryan Reeves.
Which is exactly what Florida want. If
they want Ryan Reeves to run around there and try to hit people. Like that's what they're
and take a penalty and not do anything useful. Fight some fourth liner and get scored on
I
the
would
power
very
play.
much like to see Toronto go out there and try to fight them in game 2, rather than what they can't stop at the moment, which is, surprisingly enough, playoff performer William Nylander and playoff performer Matthew Nyes.
Yeah.
Like, did we expect? I mean, Nylander, I kind of did, because Nylander was always consistently good. And
regardless of the narrative.
the Leafs fan base doesn't like hearing it all the time, but he is consistently good. Matthew Nyes in these playoffs, though, has been excellent. Like, he's been excellent. So, like, he's probably close to their best player at the moment. The other games that have happened so far, so Vegas and Edmonton, Edmonton suck early on and then come rampaging back past Vegas.
It was pretty back and forth, obviously. I don't think you can take too much out of one game in the series. Edmonton, came together late, and
it wouldn't shock me if in game 2 this was not like reversed and Edmonton get 2-0 up and then Vegas go and score 4 and you get an absolute inverse of this. I think these teams are exactly this.
Yeah, that could very well be this series, and it just depends on the coin flip of who is on top.
Which goalie decides that they know how to stop a puck.
Yeah.
And Washington, Carolina. Now, probably a little bit closer than I anticipated. But, overtime for Carolina. Yeah. But this is kind of, I think, if I was Carolina, I would look at it. And again, I'm not selling Dallas short, for example. But if I was Carolina, I would look at Colorado going out and think to myself, this has opened up a bit. And this is out, and obviously with Carolina, there's going to be some big changes for them in the offseason. Like, we're going to see some players leave. This is their shot. This is really Carolina's big shot.
Yeah, this is their last chance, really, before some significant moves.
Yeah, they've got to make some changes in the offseason. They will make some changes in the offseason. What Carolina look like next season will be very interesting. I think that they've really got to put the foot down and get through Washington as fast as they can. Because I think if they let Washington hang around too, that just opens it up for Ovi.
Look, I think Washington are a hard out. They've always been a hard out, unfortunately, Carolina are just not a team with a heap of firepower. They just never have developed that style where they put up 6 goals on someone. Like, this is probably going to be a bunch of 3-2, 2-1 games.
I think the most fascinating Eastern Conference final we could get would be Carolina versus Toronto, because you've got Toronto, who are basically an offense, versus Carolina, whose specialty is shutting down an offense. And that would be absolutely fascinating. Obviously, the Carolina would then have to do the funniest thing, and they would have to go and get David Ayres to suit up on the bench, just one game.
Of course, just to get in their heads. Yeah,
they're in their heads. Now, Dallas, Winnipeg, last one's a preview.
So first game of that series tomorrow. It's going to be interesting. It sounds like Jason Robertson is warming up. He might play. We haven't seen. I think Heiskanen is a little bit further off. So curious to see. Obviously, Mark Scheifele also is a little bit off in Winnipeg. Isn't playing right now either. So 2 battered teams. We'll see who gets healthy earliest. Honestly, I feel like that might be the key. Whoever gets healthy earliest might take this series.
I kind of feel like it's going to be Dallas.
I do think so too. I think that they're closer.
I feel like Dallas will probably now, for me, feel what I thought Colorado were going to do, which is the Winnipeg Jets will go as far as Connor Hellebuck lets them.
Yeah, which hasn't been great so far.
what he did in the first round was not great. Yeah. So I look at that and I think to myself, is that really going to be?
Yeah, look, he could turn it all around, and he
could bounce back and be amazing. But
yeah, absolutely.
I just feel like Dallas have got the shooters to be able to throw him off his game.
Yeah, especially if they can get Robertson back tomorrow or in the very near future, and Heiskanen back in the next week or so. Like, that's
Hellebuck works really well when the defense can basically limit the options to the shots are coming from one zone, and if they can limit a team shooting from one zone, Hellebuck knows how to set, and he's fine. Where I think the problem comes in is if you've got a line that's got like 2-3 scoring options on it, and he doesn't quite know where the shot's coming from. Now, the thing that might overawe this, however, and I always have to bring this up because it's always a factor, is de ball hockey. And if they revert too far into de ball hockey, that gives, I think, Winnipeg a chance because you know where the puck's coming from. So I think like they got tight. They got really tight in that Colorado series. And like if Colorado had managed to hang on, it wouldn't have shocked me if they sacked de ball. So I think de Boer was a bad third period away from being fired.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I am interested to see how Peter de Boer sets them up. I'm interested to see how they play, what style they go against Winnipeg, how do they approach Winnipeg. And I'm interested to see if Winnipeg feel like they can, put it on Dallas and not just sit back. If Winnipeg try to sit back and absorb, they're done for.
Yeah.
I think they've got to go at them.
Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked to see any of the teams that are still in come out of any of these series. But do you have any predictions that you wanna make on any of these series?
I think we're getting Dallas, Vegas.
I suspect so too.
I still think Vegas will get past Edmonton. Look, Edmonton might do it, but I still think Vegas will get past them.
I'm maybe Florida, Carolina. I'm not sure. I'm not so sure about this one.
Look, I had Toronto going out in this round.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be game 2 is going to be the decider for me on that one.
Yeah.
If Toronto turn up and fall into the trap, it's over.
Yeah.
If Toronto turn up and play hockey,
if they just put if they just eyes forward, forget all about that.
If they turn up and play the hockey that they can play, they'll win. If they turn up and decide to play the hockey that Florida want them to play, they will get thumped.
Absolutely.
It completely depends on their mindset in game 2. And how much are you trying to set the tone by going out there and trying to beat up Sam Bennett?
Yeah.
Because you know that Florida is going to put Bennett out there knowing he's a target to try to get them off their game. That is the plan. So it's up to if Toronto can not fall for it. I think they might fall for it because I think there's a narrative of you've got to be tough.
Yeah.
And I think Berube, I hope for Toronto fans' sake that Craig Berube doesn't fall into that. I fear he will.
Yeah.
And again, I think Carolina will push past Washington. I just feel like they'll do that quite nicely. Interesting, just before we go, about the idea of Carolina re-signing Freddie Anderson in the middle of the playoffs.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know why they felt they needed to get that one done now. Like, I guess that they were just like, oh well, look, that's an easy negotiation. We're happy with this. We'll just keep rolling with it. But I don't know what was going to change if they waited a couple of weeks.
Yeah, was it a confidence thing to try to give him confidence? We're re-signing you now. I mean,
maybe, yeah. I mean, it's probably been in the draw for a while, and maybe it was just like maybe it came up just naturally, just like we want to get it done. All right, let's get it done.
It was interesting. It was an interesting decision.
Yeah.
So that's going to do us for this episode of The Extra Shift. Thank you, everyone, for watching, listening. We had a lot of people listening because it was back on the feed finally. So thank you for that. Really appreciate that. We really do appreciate it. We will be back after the second round to look at the conference finals. And I'm really interested to see what we're looking at in a conference final because this is, I think, unlike some previous years, I think this is now genuinely very open.
Very much so, yeah.
All right. So thank you, everyone, for listening or watching, and we will see you all later.
See ya.